Hello students. So in the last class we discussed about some major incidents defining the policy principles or the factors required to call a government democratic. We discussed how it happened in Pakistan when Pervez Musharraf uh, with the help of a military coup um, took over government and declared himself as the president. And then also we also discussed a situation in China. So now we are going to discuss another point, another important factor for determining whether government is democratic or not. So earlier we read about how the struggle for democracy was linked to the demand and universal adult franchise. This principle has now come to be accepted almost all over the world. Yet there are many instances of denial of equal right to vote. So universal franchise, I guess you all know what is universal franchise. So this has been accepted by worldwide that universal adult franchise should be followed, but there are also at times where it faces complete denial. Like in until 2015 in Saudi Arabia, women did not have the right to vote. Estonia has made its citizenship rules in such a way that people belonging to Russian minority find it difficult to get the right to vote. In Fiji, the electoral system is such that the vote of an indigenous Fiji has more value than that of an Indian Fijian. Democracy is based on a fundamental principle of political equality that gives us the third feature of a democracy. So at instances like in Saudi Arabia until 2015, women were not allowed to vote. And in Estonia, they have made their citizenship rules such that people of Russian minority don't have the right to vote. In Fiji also, the electoral system is such that the vote of an indigenous Fiji has more value than that of a Indian Fiji. So democracy is basically based on the fundamental principle of political equality. There should be equality among all the individuals. So there should not be any political differences. So now this is the third feature of democracy. In a democracy, each adult citizen must have one vote and each vote must have one value. So one person, one vote, and one vote is one value. So every individual has a right to vote. Every adult individual has a right to vote, and everyone has a right to vote once, and one vote always holds a value of equivalent to 1. So we'll read more about that in the chapter 3. Rule of law and respect for rights. So Zimbabwe attained independence from white minority rule in 1980. Since then, the country has been ruled by ZANU-PF, the party that led the freedom struggle. Its leader, Robert Mugabe, ruled the country since independence. Elections were held regularly and always won by ZANU-PF. President Mugabe was popular but also used unfair practices in elections. Over the year, his government changed the constitution several times to increase the powers of the president and make him less accountable. Opposition party workers were harassed and their meeting disrupted. Public protests and demonstrations against the government were declared illegal. So we are here discussing another aspect of democracy, that is rule of law and respect for human rights or respect for rights. So Zimbabwe attained its independence in 1980, and since then Robert Mugabe, the leader of ZANU-PF, ruled the country, and many a times elections was held, but every time he used to win it. So what happened is over the years they made many changes to the constitution also, which gave president the utmost power and hold him very less accountable for anything. And opposition parties were also very harassed and their meetings were disrupted. Political public protests and demonstrations against the government were declared illegal. So any demonstration by the public against the government were declared as illegal. And there was a law that limited the right to criticize the president. Even you could not criticize the president. The law was passed. Television and radio were controlled by the government and gave only the ruling party's version. They were independent newspapers, but the government harassed those journalists who went against it. So any government who wrote or who said anything against the government were harassed and they were banned. The government ignored some court judgments that went against it and pressurized judges. He was forced out of office in 2017. The example of Zimbabwe shows that a popular approval of the rulers is necessary in a democracy, but it is not sufficient. So the leader should be popular among the people, but it is not sufficient. The leader should be justified. He or she should be doing justice to the people. Popular leaders can be autocratic. Popular governments can be undemocratic and popular leaders can be autocratic. If we wish to assess a democracy, it is impossible to look at the elections, but it is equally important to look at the election, but it is equally important to look before and after the elections. So it not only you need to look at the factors of the elections, but also you need to look what happened before and after the elections. There should be sufficient room for normal political activity, including political opposition, in the period before elections. This requires that the state should respect some basic rights of the citizen. They should be free to think, to have opinions, to express these in public, to form associations, to protest and take other political actions. So human rights should prevail. People should have the right to speak, right to think, right to share opinions, right to express themselves in public. Everyone should be equal in the eyes of the law, and these rights must be protected by an independent judiciary whose orders are obeyed by everyone. So similarly, in this, there are some conditions that apply after the elections. The democratic government cannot do whatever it likes simply because it has won one election. It has to respect some basic rules. In particular, it has to respect some guarantees to the minorities. Every major decision has to go through a series of consultation. Every office bearer has certain rights and responsibilities assigned by the constitution and the law. Each of these is accountable not only to the people but also to other independent officials. Both these aspects give us the fourth and the final feature of democracy. A democratic government rules within the limits set by constitutional law and citizen rights. So in the next class, we'll continue with this in the next class.